Hi guys, in the last lecture we saw the structure of a UG cable in which we saw different layers. The first layer was core, which was used to carry the current from the sending end to the receiving end. Then we were covering it by means of an insulating layer so that there is no leakage current to the ground. Then we protected the insulation by means of a sheath or a metallic sheath. And then we protected the cable or the sheath by a layer called as bedding. Then we protected the cable from mechanical damage by a layer called armoring. And outer covering was called as surveying, which protected the armoring. Then we saw the insulation resistance, which was rho by 2 pi L ln R by R, where capital R is the sheath radius and small r is the conductor radius. Then we saw electric field distribution, which we derived as V by X ln R by R. So we saw maximum electric field occurred at the conductor surface, it was this, and minimum electric field was this much. And we saw the most economic radius was R is equal to R by E. So in this lecture we will continue from this point. So in the last lecture we saw that due to a difference between Emax and Emin, the insulator was not fully utilized, or the insulating requirement was more. Due to high Emax we will require the more insulation, which increased the cost of the cable. So that is why we want the electric field distribution to be uniform, or there should be less difference between Emax and Emin. Okay, so Emax and Emin should be as close as possible. Ideally, the electric field should be constant. So G, or the electric field, is lambda by 2 pi epsilon x. If this is to be taken as constant, then epsilon x will be constant. That means as x increases, epsilon should decrease. So as we move from the center or the core to the sheath, the permittivity should decrease. But the thing is, one material can have only one value of permittivity. So that means as we move outward, we must continuously change the material or the insulating material. But that means we would require an infinite number of insulators, which is not possible practically. Okay? Because at every point permittivity will be different and the material will also be different. So we need infinite number of dielectric materials. That is why instead of using the infinite number of dielectric materials, what we do is we use 3 or 4 dielectrics, that is called as grading of the cable. As it is shown here, we are using 3 dielectrics having a permittivity epsilon 1, epsilon 2 and epsilon 3. So that is why we are approximating infinite number of dielectrics by a finite number of dielectrics so as to reduce the difference between Emax and Emin. Though it will not make the difference 0, but it will certainly reduce the difference. Now there are two criteria. One, we can keep the factor of safety same for all dielectrics, or other thing that we can do is we can keep the working stress or the maximum electric field same. Okay. Why are these criteria required? The thing is, now I give you 4 dielectrics having different permittivities. How do you know which dielectric will be placed near to the conductor and which will be placed outside? We do not randomly arrange the dielectrics. There must be some method. So to place the dielectrics, we have two procedures: keeping the factor of safety same or keeping working stress to be same. So let us see first of all keeping the factor of safety constant. What is the factor of safety? Now I told you dielectric strength should always be greater than the maximum electric field, so the dielectric does not break down. So dielectric strength divided by Emax is called as factor of safety. Means how much margin are you using while using a dielectric. Suppose maximum electric field is 15 kV per mm, then the dielectric strength should be greater than 15, let us say 20. Then 20 by 15 will give me the safety factor. Okay. Now for material 1, if we see the maximum dielectric field for the maximum electric field for any insulator will occur at the inner surface of the dielectric. As we saw, the maximum electric field occurs at the surface of conductor or the inner surface of dielectric. So maximum electric field for first material will be lambda by 2 pi epsilon 1 r, because r is the radius of inner surface. Emax 2, it will be lambda by 2 pi epsilon 2. The inner radius for material 2 is r1. Emax 3 will be lambda by 2 pi epsilon 3 r2, because inner surface of epsilon 3 will be r2 radius. Now Emax can be written as g by factor of safety. Let us say g1 by f, g2 by f, g3 by f. Here I have kept factor of safety same for all the materials. Now if you calculate here lambda f by 2 pi, lambda f by 2 pi in case of first material will be epsilon r g1. For second it will be epsilon 2 r1 g2. For third it will be epsilon 3 r2 g3. Now we know r is less than r1 is less than r2. Okay. So it implies epsilon 1 g1 should be greater than epsilon 2 g2 should be greater than epsilon 3 g3. Since the product must be constant, so if AB is constant, if A is high, B must be low, or if A is low, B must be high. Since R is the lowest value, the other term must be the highest. So that means the dielectric which has the highest product of permittivity and the dielectric strength should be placed nearest to the conductor. Okay, because which dielectric is nearest to the conductor here? Epsilon 1, and we see the product of epsilon 1 into G1 is highest. So the criteria goes something like this: material with highest dielectric strength and the permittivity product will be placed closest to the core. Next, if we keep the working stress same, working stress is the maximum electric field. Now maximum electric field for first one was lambda by 2 pi epsilon 1 r should be equal to lambda by 2 pi epsilon 2 r1 or lambda by 2 pi epsilon 3 r2. Now comparing, we will get epsilon 1 r is equal to epsilon 2 r1 is equal to epsilon 3 r2. Since r is less than r1 is less than r2, epsilon 1 will be greater than epsilon 2 will be greater than epsilon 3. So with the material which has the highest permittivity will be closest to the conductor. Now if you see the graph that is plotted here, Emax is same for all the three materials. That is what a criteria I am using. Emax is same for all the three materials. So if you see the difference between Emax and Emin is this much. If there was only a single dielectric, the graph would go something like this. So if you see, the difference would have been higher. Okay. So due to maintaining more dielectrics, the ripple in the electric field or the difference between minimum and maximum electric field would be low. Okay. So that is why we use multiple dielectrics instead of a single dielectric. That is called as grading of the cable. Now let us talk about capacitance of the cable. As we saw when we compared it with the overhead line, capacitance of the cable is higher than the overhead line. That means we need to determine the capacitance. How were we determining the capacitance in overhead line? We were determining something like this. In the last lecture we derived lambda was 2 pi epsilon naught epsilon r v over ln R by R. So capacitance would be 2 pi epsilon naught epsilon R over ln R by R. This formula is similar to what we derived for overhead line. There it was 2 pi epsilon naught epsilon R ln GMD by R. So here instead of GMD we are getting the sheath radius. Okay, that is the radius of the outer surface of the insulator. If we want to determine the line charging current, it should be V by XC, or we can say omega C phase V phase. The same formula that we studied for the case of overhead line. But here what I am doing is, I have one core and I have one insulator, something like this. Okay, so the core radius is small r and the insulator radius is capital R. But in case of three-phase cable, inside a single cable we will have multiple conductors. Then what happens to the capacitance? Whenever we have three-phase conductor inside a single cable, it is called as three-core cable or three-conductor cable, because we have three cores or three conductors each belonging to a different phase. Now if you see, whenever we have three conductors, when we had one conductor, there was a capacitance that was being formed between the conductor and the sheath. Okay, or we can say core to sheath capacitance when we had only single core. So this CS here represents the core to sheath capacitance. But similarly, as we studied in overhead transmission line, between two transmission lines always there is some capacitance, that is core to core capacitance CC here. So we have two capacitances in total. One is the core to sheath capacitance CS and one is the intercore capacitance, that is CC. But now if I ask you, suppose these are three phases, let us say A, B, C. If we ask what is the capacitance of phase A, so we do not know the capacitance per phase, but to determine the line charging current or the reactive power, we need the capacitance per phase. So how to convert or how to differentiate the capacitance of different phases? We must convert this delta into star. Now when we convert delta into star, Z delta is Z star by 3. So it will be 1 by omega C delta will be 1 by omega C star into 3. So C delta will be, so it will be Z star will be, it should be Z star will be Z delta by 3. So here it will be C star C delta. So it implies 3C delta will be equal to C star. So when we go from delta to star, the capacitance that will be formed in star will be 3 times Cc. Then how will my connection look like? It will be something like this: CS, CS, CS. It will be 3cc, 3cc, 3cc. But what happens is, since now we have a neutral point which was not available earlier, so we need to make it neutral, or we need to make it at the ground potential. Now we will assume that the sheath is always at the ground potential. So we can connect the neutral to the sheath so as it is also at the ground potential. Now to determine the capacitance per phase, we need to combine this CS and 3cc. It appears here that both are in series, but in actual both are connected in parallel. How? For parallel connection, what is the condition? If two devices are in parallel, then both their plates must be common. So if you see here, this plate is common and this plate is also common, something like this. So both the plates of the two capacitors are common, so both are connected in parallel. In parallel, the equivalent will be addition of the two CS plus 3cc. Okay, this will be your per phase capacitance when both the capacitors are connected in parallel. Okay. Now we need to understand how to calculate this CS and CC. First of all, the insulation level. Now there will be two insulation levels in case of the 3-core cable. One insulation level will lie between the two cores and one between the core and sheath. The voltage between the core and sheath will be actually the phase voltage. So core to sheath insulation level will be decided on the basis of phase voltage. But the voltage between the two cores will be actually line voltage. So core to core insulation level will be decided on the basis of line voltage. Now, we do not know CC and CS. We need an experimental procedure in which we can determine CS, CC and C phase. So let us see what we can do. So let us first what we do is, we will connect two cores to the sheath. Let me say I am connecting these two cores to the sheath and I am measuring the capacitance between remaining core and sheath. Let me call this capacitance C1. Now what will happen? This capacitor gets short circuited. This also gets short circuited here. And this capacitor is also short circuited like this. So this capacitor, this and this will be removed. So what I will have is, this is CC, CC and CS. Okay. Now if you see, one terminal is common in these three capacitors and other terminal, that is the sheath. So what will be the equivalent capacitance? All three are connected in parallel. C1 will be CS plus 2CC. Okay, since two terminals are common in all the three capacitors. So that is what we have, one equation for finding out CS and CC. Next what we do is, we will connect all the three cores together and then measure the capacitance between core and sheath. All three will be connected together. So all the three CCs are getting short circuited. So what I have essentially is, this sort of circuit, because the internal capacitances will be removed, or we can say intercore capacitance is removed. Now if we measure the capacitance between the core and the sheath, let me call it as C2. What will be this C2? Here if you see, this terminal is common for all the three capacitor and this terminal is also common for all the three capacitor. So C2 will be 3 times CS. This is my second equation. So from here I know CS is equal to C2 by 3. So we know CS. We know CS plus 2CC is equal to C1. So we can say CC is equal to C1 by 2 minus C2 by 6. I have substituted CS is equal to C2 by 3. Now we know CS and CC, we can calculate C phase. That is CS plus 3CC. C2 by 3, 3C1 by 2 minus C2 by 2. So it will be 3C1 by 2 minus C2 by 6. That will be my C phase. So this way we can calculate phase capacitance. We can calculate the core to sheath capacitance as well as the intercore capacitance. Okay. But let us take another case. Now what we do is, we connect one core to the sheath and we measure the capacitance between remaining two cores. Let me call it as C3. Then what will happen? If this core is connected to sheath, concentrate on these two capacitance. This terminal is common. This terminal is also common by means of sheath. So both these capacitors are connected in parallel. So what will happen is, CS plus CC, CS plus CC, and this is CC. Okay. Now they have only one terminal common, this one, and this is connected to other capacitors CC. So both are in series. If two equal capacitors are connected in series, equivalent is C by 2. So it will be CS plus CC divided by 2, and here it will be CC. If we add both, it will be 3CC by 2 plus CS by 2, which will be equal to C phase by 2. So that means I can say C phase is equal to 2 times C3. This is the most important case that you must always remember, because sometimes if I am asking you the line charging current, I might not be giving you C phase directly, rather I will be giving you C3. So you need to double it and then find C phase to find the line charging current. So if you see in this case, we can directly get the per phase capacitance, no need to calculate CS and CC individually. So let us summarize what we covered in this lecture. We first saw the grading of cable. In this we saw factor of safety can be same or Emax is same. If factor of safety is kept same, then the material with the highest product of permittivity and the dielectric strength is kept nearest to the conductor, and if Emax is kept same, material with highest permittivity is kept nearest to the conductor. Then we saw capacitance, which was 2 pi epsilon naught epsilon r divided by ln r by r. Then we saw capacitance of 3-core cable, in which we saw three cases. First of all, C phase was computed as CS plus 3CC, and then what we did is we connected two cores to sheath and measured the capacitance between core and sheath. That was C1 CS plus 2CC. If we connected all the three capacitors together, it was 3CS. Then we connected one conductor to sheath and measured the capacitance between the other two conductors, C3, that was C phase by 2. So these three cases we saw to measure the capacitance of a 3-core cable. So this is all from this lecture. In the next lecture we will see what kind of losses do occur in a cable. As we saw in case of overhead line, I square and V square G losses and the corner loss, what kind of losses does a cable encounter? Hi guys, in the last lecture we saw to reduce the difference between the maximum and the minimum electric field occurring in a cable, we graded the cables, and in the grading we saw two criteria in which factor of safety was same or Emax was same. When factor of safety was same, I told you the material with the highest product of permittivity and the dielectric strength is kept nearest to the conductor. And when working stress was same, the material with the highest permittivity was nearest to the conductor. Then we saw capacitance of the cable. It came out to be 2 pi epsilon naught epsilon r ln d by ln R by R. This was for a single core cable. For 3-core cable, we saw there were two capacitances CS and CC, core to sheath and the intercore capacitance. And we saw to measure CS and CC, we took 3 cases. In the first case, I connected the core to sheath. 2 cores were connected to sheath and capacitance was measured between the other core and sheath. It was CS plus 2CC. Then we connected all the 3 cores together and measured the capacitance between core and sheath. It came out to be 3CS. Then we connected one core to sheath and measured the capacitance between other 2 cores. It come out to be C phase by 2, where C phase is CS plus 3CC. Okay. In this lecture, we will focus our attention to what are the different type of losses that a cable encounters. So the first type of loss that a cable undergoes is I square R loss. So here R refers to the core resistance, that is rho core into L by A, where A is the cross section area of core. Okay. L is the length of cable. Rho core is the resistivity of core. So as we saw, as temperature increases, R core will increase, which causes increase in the I square R loss. Okay. So this conduction loss or the ohmic loss will increase with increase in temperature. So this is not the important loss for us because this will happen with every conduction wave, whether you are using overhead line or you are using an underground cable. The most important loss in a cable is dielectric loss. Now what is a dielectric loss? So the major components of dielectric loss are, there are two components. One is that the dielectric resistivity rho insulator is not equal to infinity. That means R insulator is not equal to infinity. That means leakage current, which is equal to V by R insulator, is non-zero. So there will be some I square R loss in insulator. This is due to the leakage current. Since the leakage current flows for both DC and AC, this loss is constant. The other reason for dielectric loss is, in case of dielectric, what is actually a dielectric? A dielectric is nothing but a material which consists of electric dipoles. What is a dipole? A negative and positive charge bounded together, separated by a distance. Now what happens? In dipole, we define a dipole moment that is from negative to the positive charge. Okay. And how do the dipole is formed? First of all, if you consider an atom, there will be a nucleus around which electrons will be revolving. If we apply an external electric field, then positive charge will be moving in the direction of electric field, negative charge away from the electric field. So there will be a dipole formed with a dipole moment in this direction. Now if you see, the dipole moment lies in the same direction as the electric field. But if we use a AC voltage, then after every half cycle, the polarity of voltage will reverse, due to which the electric field will also reverse after every half cycle. So the orientation of dipoles will need to be reversed after every half cycle. Since we are reversing the orientation of dipoles, we need some sort of energy. It is similar to what we need in case of hysteresis. In case of hysteresis, due to alternating magnetic field, we needed to change the orientation of magnetic dipoles. Here, for our alternating electric field, we need to change the orientation of electrical dipoles. So that is analogous to the hysteresis loss. So it is the major component of the dielectric loss, but it can only occur for the AC. Okay. Again, I am repeating, there are two components of dielectric loss. One is due to the leakage current through the dielectric. Other is due to the reversal of polarization under alternating electric field. The major component is the reversal of polarization, but that only occurs for AC and not for DC, because in case of DC, voltage is constant, so electric field direction will also be constant. So how do we represent a dielectric loss? We will show a dielectric as a resistance in parallel with capacitance. Okay. So here we will have some voltage, some current. This will be divided into two parts, IR and IC. Okay. So the dielectric loss will be, for a single phase, V square by R. For three phase it will be 3V square by R. Now if we draw the phasor diagram, this will be V. Then there will be a leading current, that is IC. And there will be a current in the same phase, that is IR. So the total sum of these two currents will give me I. And the angle between voltage and current gives me power factor angle. This angle we will call as delta. So let me mark it as OABC. Now if you see the triangle OCB, in OCB, tan delta is equal to tan delta will be BC by OC. BC is actually IR, OC is IC. Now IR will be given by simply V by R, whereas IC will be V by XC, or we can say IC will be equal to omega CV, because XC will be 1 by omega C. So IR by IC will be V by R, V by V into omega C. So it will be 1 by omega RC. This is called as loss tangent. Okay. And delta is called as the loss angle. Usually, since the power factor of a capacitor is almost 0 power factor leading, so delta will be very small, as phi is almost 90 degree. So we can replace tan delta by delta in such a case. Now what is the significance of this loss tangent? The thing is, if we see the stored power, first of all, dissipated power in the capacitor will be V square by R. Stored will be V square by XC, that is omega C V square. So dissipated by stored will be 1 by omega RC, which is equal to tan delta. So it expresses the dissipated power in a capacitor to the stored power, that will give me the loss tangent. Now if we want to find the dielectric loss per phase, is V square by R. R can be written here as, or we can say V square into 1 by R. 1 by R is nothing but omega CV square tan delta. Here use V phase for single phase. For three phase, it will be 3 omega C phase V phase square tan delta. Okay, that will be the dielectric loss in case of a three phase underground cable. So that way we need to calculate the dielectric loss. This is one of the most important formulas from this topic, underground cable. The next type of loss is called as sheath loss or armoring loss. Now what happens when the current flows in the conductor? There will be some flux. Now this flux will not be restricted to the interior region of the cable. Rather, it will also link to the sheath and the armoring layer. Now the sheath and the armoring layer are made of metal. Okay, they are made of conducting material, due to which, due to the alternating flux, EMF is induced in the sheath and armoring layer. So first of all, there will be a resultant flux, which is equal to phi A plus phi B plus phi C. Due to this resultant flux, there is a sheath EMF, which will be d phi R by dt. Now this sheath EMF will cause some eddy currents which will cause sheath loss. But what happens, as we saw in case of a 3-core cable, the 3 conductors are placed symmetrically. So their net flux should be 0. In case of 3-core cable, resultant flux is 0. So sheath loss is 0. But the problem is, as I told you, the core to core insulation level is decided on the voltage level or the line to line voltage. What happens if we keep on increasing the voltage, the insulation level will go on increasing, and after a certain time the design of the cable will become impractical. So instead of 3 core cable, we will use 3 single core cables at higher voltages. Okay, that is voltage greater than 33 kV, we will use 3 single core cables. In this case, the resultant flux will not be 0 as the 3 cables will not be symmetrically placed. The 3 cables may be laid underground horizontally. Since it is not symmetrical, phi r will be non-zero and there will be some sheath loss. Okay, so that is why in case of single core cable, sheath loss is non-zero, but in case of 3 core cable, the sheath loss will be 0. It is due to the eddy currents induced in the sheath and armoring layer due to alternating flux produced by the conductor. Now let us see what are the effect of various parameters on the losses in a cable, on the 3 losses that we studied. First is, if I core increases. If I core increases, I square R loss will increase. Now dielectric loss, it does not depend on current, it depends on voltage, so it will remain constant. But in case of sheath loss, more current implies more flux and more EMF and the more eddy current. So sheath loss will increase. Okay, due to more current, flux linkages increase, due to which induced EMF also increases. Next is, suppose we increase the frequency. Then what happens to I square R loss? It must remain constant? No, it will increase due to skin effect and proximity effect. As frequency is increased, cross-sectional area of conduction reduces, so resistance increases and I square R loss increase. Dielectric loss will also increase. It was omega C V square. Okay, so it was proportional to omega and the frequency. But about sheath loss, induced EMF is always proportional to frequency. As we saw in machines, induced EMF is 4.44 F N phi. So it is proportional to frequency. So as the induced EMF increases, the sheath loss will increase. Next, suppose we increase the length of the line. Increasing the length will decrease the resistance. As we saw, the resistance is inversely proportional to length. No, the resistance that we are talking about here is the core resistance, and R core is rho L by A. So increasing the length increases the core resistance and I square R losses increase. Increasing the length increases the capacitance, so dielectric loss will also increase, and similarly sheath loss will also increase because flux linkage will increase as flux is equal to Li. Increasing the length increases the inductance and the flux linkage. Okay, so now losses are more in case of cable, as we have different type of losses due to which heating is more and the thermal damage can happen in a cable. So that is why we do not use cable for bulk power transmission or very high power transfer capability. But what happens if we use DC? DC frequency is 0. So there is no skin effect or proximity effect. So I square R losses will reduce. Frequency is 0. Dielectric loss has only one component, that is the leakage component. So dielectric loss is almost 0. Only the leakage component will remain. The component which is analogous to hysteresis will disappear. And lastly, sheath loss will be 0 as there will be 0 induced EMF. Okay, that will happen in case of DC. Thus in case of DC cable, losses are reduced and hence the heating is also reduced for a DC cable. Let us look at a problem based on the underground cable. A 110 kV single core coaxial XLP is cross-linked polyethylene insulated power cable at 50 Hz has a capacitance and dielectric loss tangent is given. We need to find dielectric power loss. First of all, if you observe the voltage level, since it is not given, it is a single phase or three phase, but the voltage rating is high. This is not possible in single phase. So we will take a three phase cable, but it is talking about single core. As I told you, if voltage is greater than 33 kV, we use three single core cables. That means we have three phase system, but each cable is a single core. So V phase will be 110 by root 3 kV. Okay. Now it is delivering power at 50 Hz. Capacitance is 125 nanofarad per kilometer. So dielectric power loss is omega C phase V phase square tan delta. So omega will be 2 into pi into 50. C phase is 125 into 10 raised power minus 9. V phase square is 110 into 10 raised power 3 square by 3. Tan delta is 2 into 10 raised power minus 4. Okay. So this will come out to be 31.7 watt per kilometer. Okay. So remember, here we have to use V phase. Do not assume it to be a single core cable or a single phase cable. Though it is single core, but it is three phase cable. In our next problem, it is saying the insulation resistance of 10 km length is 1 mega ohm. What is the resistance for 100 km? We know insulation resistance is inversely proportional to length. So R2 by R1 will be equal to L1 by L2. So new resistance will be 1 mega ohm into L1 by L2 is 10 by 100. That is 0.1 mega ohm. So that will be the insulation resistance for 100 km of the cable. So let us summarize what we covered in this lecture. We saw first of all I square R losses there will be in the conductor, and as temperature increases I square R loss will increase. Then we saw dielectric loss which occurred due to two major reasons. One was the leakage current through the insulator, and the second reason was due to reversal of the polarization in every half cycle of the alternating electric field. So it came out to be omega C phase V phase square tan delta, where tan delta is the loss tangent. And last we saw the sheath loss which occurs due to flux linkage of the conductor through the sheath and the armoring layer. So these three losses occur in a cable. So this is all from the underground cable. In the next lecture we will see what kind of insulators do we use for the case of overhead line. That we will see in the next lecture. Hi guys, in the last lecture we covered underground cables. We saw what is the construction of underground cable, what is the resistance of the UG cable, what is the capacitance, and what are the various kind of losses. But the one factor that differentiates the underground cable and the overhead lines is that overhead line conductors are bare and open to atmosphere, whereas underground cable conductors are always shielded by the insulator coating. So in case of overhead lines, we used to hang the lines on the towers. But towers are metallic structures, so they are conducting. But we do not want any current to flow from the line to the ground through the tower. That is why we need an insulator between the tower and the transmission line so that no current can flow into the ground. Such insulators are called as overhead insulators. And how they are placed is, suppose this is a tower. This is the cross arm of the tower. there will be insulator, then there will be line, so that current cannot flow from this line to the ground because this tower will be grounded. Okay, so these are called as overhead line insulators or overhead insulators. This is your called as cross arm. Okay, now usually, as we know, for voltage rating greater than 345 kV, insulation level will be decided based on switching over voltage, whereas for voltage less than 345 kV, insulation level will be decided on the basis of lightning over voltage. That will decide how many number of insulators you require between the tower and the transmission line to reduce the leakage current from the line to the ground. Now, what are the properties of the insulators? Properties will remain same as that of UG cable. But as you can see in the figure, here the insulator will have to bear the weight of the transmission line. So it must have high mechanical strength. Otherwise, it can break down under the weight of the transmission line. What are the materials that we can use is? We can use porcelain, we can use toughened glass. Toughened glass is glass which has a high mechanical strength. We can use epoxy resin, or we can use magnesium silicate. These are the four materials that we generally use to construct the overhead line insulator. Now there are various construction of the overhead line insulator. First is called as pin type insulator. Pin type insulator is shown here. This structure here is called as groove. This is given here so that transmission line can be placed or passed through this groove like this. Okay, and these structures are called as shell, and this is placed on the cross arm of the tower with the help of a pin. That is why it is called as pin type of insulator. Okay, this is my cross arm. Now as you can see from the figure, the top disc or the top shell has higher radius as compared to the bottom shell. Why is it? So that if rain is falling, suppose, then it will affect only the top shell and the bottom shell will be protected. That is why top shell will always have a higher radii as compared to the bottom shell. So these sort of insulators can be used at less than equal to 33 kV. Because if you keep on increasing the voltage, then we have to increase the number of shells. And as you increase the number of shells, the stress on this pin will increase and the insulator will be mechanically unstable. You won't be able to place it comfortably on the tower cross arm. There are chances that it will break down. Okay. So these are uneconomical or they become bulky for voltage greater than 33 kV. So you can easily see them in case of single phase 2-wire line. These are easily visible. Okay. In your surroundings, if you observe, most of the insulators are this type only. Now what to do in case we want to use it at a higher voltage? Then we go for suspension type of insulator. This insulator will be suspended at the horizontal cross arm of the tower, and here we will pass the transmission line. Now if you see, it consists of various structures which are connected by metal link. This is your metal link. And the structures which are connected by metal links are called as disc. So there are multiple insulator discs. Each of them is connected to each other by a metal link. This is called as suspension type of insulator. The advantage that we get here is if one of the discs get damaged, the whole unit is not damaged. You can easily replace that disc by another disc. So here it is more reliable. Plus, if you want to increase the rating or the voltage rating, you can directly increase the number of discs. So here N refers to the number of discs. If you increase the number of discs, you can increase the voltage rating. But in case of pin type of insulator, to increase the number of shells, you will have to remanufacture the insulator, because shells are fixed there and they are made at the time of manufacturing. They are not connected to each other. It is like that only at the time of manufacturing. So that's why if one of the shells get damaged, you have to remanufacture or replace the entire unit. So they are less reliable. Okay. So that is the advantage of a suspension type insulator. It is just an extension of the pin type insulator at higher voltage. Next is called as shackle type of insulator. So why does this shackle type of insulator is used? Suppose we have a road that is going like this. So one tower is there, one is here. If transmission line is coming like this and it has to go like this, then if we directly connect it, there will be a sharp turn, and due to this sharp turn, here area will be less, due to which current density will be more, due to which electric field will be higher. So we will say that it is overstressed due to high electric field. So we do not want any sharp turn in the case of transmission line. What we do is, we use shackle type insulator on both these towers like this. Okay, and the transmission line on both the towers will be connected by means of a jumper. Now since they are connected by a jumper, there is no sharp turn in the transmission line and there is no high electric field induced in the line. So that is how we can avoid increasing the tension or the electric field in the transmission line. These are usually used at less than 11 kilovolt voltages. Okay, they are used whenever there is a dead end in the transmission line or there is a sharp turn in the transmission line. Now to use it for higher voltages, we use a modified version which is called as strain type of insulator. It is similar to suspension type, but here the discs are arranged in horizontal manner instead of the vertical manner. So this is called as strain type of insulator. It is an extension of the shackle type of insulator but for higher voltage. So this will be used above 11 kV. Okay, this is called as jumper. So this will also be used where your transmission line encounters a dead end or a sharp turn to avoid increasing the strain or the stress in the transmission line. Now we saw that suspension and the strain type of insulators are manufactured via different discs. So how do we decide how many discs are there to be used in the particular insulator? How many discs you should use? So the generally accepted criteria is that number of discs will be based on line voltage. Okay. Now this is suspension type and strain type. Suppose line voltage is 66 kV. Then in suspension type we use 5 discs, in strain type we use 6 discs. If it is 132 kV, we use 9 discs and 10 discs. If it is 220 kV, we use 13 to 15 discs, but in strain type we use 14 to 16 discs. In 400 kV we use here 20 to 25 discs, here 23 to 26. And for 765 kV, that is UHV line, we will use here 35 discs and here 36. So usually in strain type of insulator we will use more discs as compared to your suspension type of insulator. Now these two terms are associated when we talk about insulator. One is called as flashover, other is called as puncture. Now suppose this is my insulator which is connected to the tower cross arm, and here we have a transmission line. Now suppose what happens is that due to high voltage, electric field will be high, the air around this ionizes. So if air around this ionizes, the air around this will become conducting, due to which current can flow from the transmission line to the tower. If current can flow like this is called as insulator flashover, because a flash or an arc will be formed around the insulator and the current will conduct from the transmission line to the ground. The other term is called as puncture. Puncture is at a more higher voltage. So V puncture is greater than flashover. If voltage is very high, then insulator is basically nothing but a dielectric. A dielectric is nothing but it consists of dipole. So if it will break down, then current will directly flow through the insulator. That is called as your insulator puncture. Okay, puncture is when insulator breaks down and allows the flow of current, and flashover is when the air around the insulator breaks down and allows the flow of current through the arc or the flash. That is called as insulator flashover. In any case, we will encounter the line to ground fault, as the current will flow from the transmission line to the ground through the tower. Okay, that will be called as line to ground fault. Now let us understand, if we are using multiple disks, whether there will be uniform voltage distribution or the voltage will be distributed non-uniformly, because if I know how the voltage is distributed, then only I can identify how many disks do I require for any particular type of insulator. Okay. So here there are two type of capacitances that are defined. One is called as CM, that is mutual capacitance. Other is called as CS, that is shunt capacitance. This is shunt, this is mutual. Okay, these two type of capacitances are defined. Now why mutual and shunt? Between two disks, if two disks acts as a plate, there will be a capacitance between them, that will be called as CM. And since this disk and the tower can also act as a plate, there will be shunt capacitance. Okay, so these two type of capacitance can be defined based on the two type of possibilities in which the capacitance can be formed. Now, since we have three disks here, so there will be one CS also here, 3 CM and 3 CS. The voltage of this line with respect to tower will be V phase, because voltage to ground is your phase voltage. Since this shaded here indicates that this is grounded, because the tower is your grounded. So what is the voltage across this CS? It will be V phase. Okay, because it is connected between the line and the ground, so it will have phase voltage across it. So its voltage is always fixed, it will always be equal to your phase voltage. So there is no point in using this capacitor or representing this capacitor in the circuit, because its voltage will not change, it will always be fixed equal to V phase. So we can remove this capacitor here. Now we have assumed current something like this. In this capacitor we have I3, I2 and I1. Here current is I1 dash, I2 dash. So if we apply KCL, I3 will be equal to I2 plus I2 dash, I2 will be equal to I1 plus I1 dash. Now suppose we apply KCL at node 1. I2 is equal to I1 plus I2 dash, I1 dash. Now first of all, current I2 is flowing in this capacitor CM, which has a voltage across V2. Now current in any capacitor is V by XC, which means J omega CV. So I2 will be J omega CM V2. I1 is in this capacitor, J omega CM V1. And I1 dash is in this capacitor. Here the voltage of this capacitor is V1, here it is 0. So this capacitor also has the voltage V1, J omega CS V1. So we can write V2 is equal to V1 plus CS by CM into V1. Now what we do is, V2 is equal to V1, 1 plus CS by CM. I define this term C shunt by C mutual as M. So V2 will be equal to V1 into 1 plus M. This is my first equation. Now if we apply KCL at the second node, it will be, so I3 will be equal to I2 plus I2 dash. Okay. Now I3 is the current in this capacitor, in this one. So its current will be j omega Cm into V3. I2 is in this, j omega Cm V2. I2 dash is in this. So the voltage of this capacitor will be, this voltage is V1 plus V2, voltage with respect to ground, and this voltage is 0. So capacitor voltage is V1 plus V2. So I3 is j omega Cm into V3. I2 is j omega Cm into V2. I2 dash is j omega Cs V1 plus V2. So V3 will be V2 plus Cs by Cm V1 plus V2. Now V2 can be written as V1 into 1 plus M. Cs by Cm is M. Okay. Now if we simplify this, we will get V3 is equal to V1 M square plus 3M plus 1. So now we have expressed all the voltages in terms of V1. The sum of this voltage will be equal to the conductor voltage. Will be equal to conductor voltage, that is V phase. This is my third equation. And if we express all in terms of V1, it will be 1 plus M plus 1 plus M square plus 3M plus 1 V phase, or V1 will be equal to V phase divided by M square plus 4M plus 3. So this way we can calculate V1 and then we can calculate rest of the voltages. Now we know this factor of M will be greater than 0. So here V2 will be greater than V1 because this factor is greater than 1, and V3 will be greater than V2. Okay, because V3 was V2 plus M into V1 plus V2. So it is always greater than V2. So we see as we move towards the conductor, the voltage increases. So the insulator disc near to the conductor is overstressed and the insulator disc away from the conductor is under stress. That is, the voltage across the insulator disc nearest to the conductor will always be higher. So this non-uniformity in the voltage is always undesirable. Why? Because suppose I buy a dielectric or an insulator with a dielectric strength 20 kV, but the voltage across the insulator which is farther away from the conductor is 10 kV or 5 kV, then my capacity is being wasted. I want all the voltages to be equal and should have the minimum value so that voltage rating reduces. Okay, or we want each insulator disc to share the maximum voltage so that number of discs can be minimized. If we are using 20 kV disc, we want each disc to support 20 kV so that we require lesser number of discs as compared to the non-uniform distribution. So we want every voltage should be equal to this V3 because this is the maximum among the voltage. If every disc share V3 amount of voltage, then the number of discs required will be lesser as compared to non-uniform distribution. So this non-uniformity is expressed in terms of string efficiency. What is string efficiency? Total string voltage, which is equal to V phase divided by number of discs into V3, or the maximum voltage across any disc, which will always be the bottommost disc. So here we have V1 into M square plus 4M plus 3 divided by 3 into M square plus 3M plus 1. So if you see, string efficiency is entirely dependent on the value of M and it does not depend on the value of voltage. Okay, so that is the beauty of this string efficiency. No matter whatever voltage you are using, string efficiency will always be dependent on the number of discs that you are using and what is the ratio of shunt to the mutual capacitance. That will define your string efficiency. So even if you increase the conductor voltage, it will not affect your string efficiency. Okay. Now what happens in case of strain type insulator? As we saw, there the discs were laid horizontally. And in case of horizontal, as you use more disk, the disk which is at the last will have the highest distance from the tower. And as the distance from the tower increases, the capacitance reduces. Which capacitance? CS, because this was the capacitance between the disk and the tower. So this CS reduces. So M, which is CS by CM, also reduces. If M reduces, the non-uniformity in the voltage will go down, because V2 was V1 into 1 plus M. So if M goes down, V2 becomes almost equal to V1. So if you want to reduce the non-uniformity in the voltage, you need to reduce the M, and that gets automatically reduced in case of strain insulator as the distance of the disk from the tower cross arm increases. So strain type insulators will have higher efficiency as compared to your suspension type of insulators. Okay. So this string efficiency is a critical criteria in determining how many number of disks are to be used, and we want the voltage distribution to be uniform, so the string efficiency should be as high as possible. Now how to improve the string efficiency? As we saw, non-uniformity can be reduced if the value of M is reduced. M is directly proportional to your shunt capacitance, which is equal to epsilon A by D. So if you increase D, this CS will reduce, so M will also go down. Okay. How to increase the distance? We have to increase the distance of the disk from the tower. Now distance of the disk from the tower will depend on length of this cross arm. So if you increase the cross arm length of the tower, then the distance of the disk from the tower will increase, due to which M will reduce. Now, but that will require changing in the tower construction, which is uneconomical. Whenever we want to make any changes to the tower construction, it involves a lot of cost, so we cannot implement that. That is why we cannot reduce the M value. This method is impractical. We have to resort to other methods to improve the string efficiency. Okay, so this method is uneconomical. Next method is called as insulator grading. We just now saw that each disk has the same mutual capacitance, which is equal to Cm. But now if we manufacture different disks having different capacitance C1, C2 and C3, then we already know that the current in these disks were different. Now voltage will be equal to current into impedance. If current as well as impedances are different in each disk, then we can maintain the voltage constant. We can figure out the way in which the capacitances are so designed such that the product of current and the impedance remains same across all disks. Okay. So now if we again apply KCL, I2 will be equal to I1 plus I1 dash. Here I am assuming 100% string efficiency, so V1 equal to V2 equal to V3 equal to V. So I2 will be j omega C2V, I1 will be j omega C1V, I1 dash will be j omega CS into V. Okay, so here C2 will be equal to C1 plus CS. Okay, or C1 1 plus CS by C1. C1 1 plus M, if we define M as CS upon C1. And if we apply KCL at the other node, it will be I3 will be equal to I2 plus I2 dash I3 will be equal to j omega C3V, I2 will be j omega C2V, I2 dash will be j omega Cs into V plus V. So C3 will be equal to C2 plus 2Cs, or we can say C1 plus 3Cs. Okay, and C2 is equal to C1 plus Cs. So here we will need every disk having a different capacitance, but manufacturing will be difficult. Why? Because manufacturing is a batch process. We manufacture multiple disks having the same characteristics at the same time. If we wish to manufacture each disk having a different capacitance, that would involve a lot of cost, as you have to manufacture each disk separately. Okay, so that is why this method is also not practically used. Then the question comes to mind, if every method is not practically used, then what is the method that will be used practically? That method is called as static shielding or guard wire. Here what we do is, we know the non-uniformity is due to this Cs, or the current going into this Cs capacitance. So we have to cancel out this current, which is I1 dash and I2 dash. What we do is, we connect capacitances between the insulator or the metal link and the transmission line. These are called as guard wire or the static shielding. And now if we apply KCL at the node 1, I2 will be equal to I2 plus Ix. These are incoming current, will be equal to I1 plus I1 dash. Now if you want voltage across each disk to be same, V1 equal to V2 equal to V3, then current should also be same, that is I1 must be equal to I2, which implies Ix will be equal to I1 dash. Now I1 dash will be j omega Cs into V, and Ix will be capacitance X. The voltage across capacitance X is how much? 2V. So it will be j omega Cx into 2V. So Cx will be equal to Cs upon 2. Okay. Similarly, we apply KCL at the other node. We will get I3 plus Iy is equal to I2 dash plus I2. Again, if you want voltage to be same, you want the currents to be same. So Iy will be equal to I2 dash. Current in capacitance Y, the voltage across this capacitance will be equal to V. So j omega Cy into V, whereas voltage across this I2 dash will be equal to 2V, j omega Cs into 2V. So Cy will be equal to 2V. So by this method we calculate the capacitance of the shield wire or the guard wire. But if you have the large number of disks, let us say 35 or 36 disks, then we do not use guard wire at each and every metal link. We will use at the last few links so that non-uniformity can be minimized, if not reduced to 0. If you even cannot reduce it to 0, you want to minimize the non-uniformity so that string efficiency can be increased. So let us summarize what we have covered in this lecture. We first saw different type of insulators, which were pin type insulator, suspension type, strain type and shackle type. Then we saw the number of disks that are required in suspension type and your strain type of insulator. Then we saw what is insulator, flashover and puncture. Then we saw how is the voltage distributed. We saw V2 is equal to V1 into 1 plus M, and V3 is equal to V1 M square plus 3M plus 1, and V phase will be equal to V1 plus V2 plus V3. And the last we saw how to increase the string efficiency by reducing M, which was impractical, by using 3 capacitances such that C2 is equal to C1 plus Cs, C3 is equal to C1 plus 3Cs. This was also impractical. and by using guard wire in which Cx was equal to C by 2 and Cy was equal to 2C. This method we generally use. In the next lecture, we will see the problems based on underground cable and your overhead line insulators. That we will cover in the next lecture. Hi guys, in the last few lectures we covered the concept of underground cable and the overhead line insulators, and in this lecture we will see a few problems based on these two topics. So let us get started with our first problem. In this question it is saying the equivalent capacitor arrangement of two string insulator is shown. The maximum voltage that each unit can withstand should not exceed 17.5 kV. We need to find line to line voltage of the system. Now, as I told you, as we move towards the conductor, the voltage across the disc will increase. So, if it is given the maximum voltage, then this will be the voltage across the disc nearest to the conductor. So, this will be your, let us say V2, V1. So, it is saying that V2 must be 17.5 kV. Now, as we derived, V2 is equal to V1 into 1 plus M, where M was Cs by Cm, that is equal to 1 by 8C divided by C. So 1 by 8. So V2 is equal to V1 into 1 plus 1 by 8, that is 9 V1 by 8. So V1 is equal to 8 by 9 V2. So it will come out to be 15.55 kV. So the total string voltage will be equal to V1 plus V2, since there are only two discs. (17.5) plus 15.55. This will come out to be 33.05 kV. Now this is the voltage between the conductor and the tower, or the conductor and the ground. So this is actually V phase. We need to find the line voltage, root 3 into 33.05. So this will come out to be 57.25 kV. So this will be the line to line voltage across the insulator string. In our next problem it is saying, in a transmission line each conductor is at 20 kV. Now here it is given conductor voltage, that is your phase voltage, and it is supported by a string of 3 suspension insulator. So it is a 3 disc insulator. The air capacitance between capacitor pin junction and tower is 1/5 of the capacitance C of each insulation unit. So Cs is Cm by 5. So M is actually 0.2. A guard ring effective only over the line and insulator is fitted so that voltage on the two units nearest to the line end are equal. So this voltage is V, this is also V, and let us call this as V1. So here V2 is equal to V3 is equal to V. We need to find the voltage on the line end unit, that is this V. We know V2 is equal to V1, 1 plus M, that is 1.2 V1, and V1 plus V2 plus V3 is V phase. So that is V1 plus 1.2 V1 plus 1.2 V1 is V phase, that is 20. So V1 will be 20 by 3.4. So this will come out to be 20 divided by 3.4 is actually 5.88 kV. We need to find the voltage across the line and unit, that is V3, 1.2 V1. So it will come out to be 7.05 kV. In the next part of the problem, it is asking the value of capacitance Cx required. Now since the voltage across these two units is same, it means their current should also be same. So let me assume some currents here. Ix, I2 dash, I, their currents must be same. So Ix must be equal to I2 dash. Now Ix will be equal to j omega Cx into Vx, j omega C by 5 into V2 dash. J omega Cx, voltage across this capacitor. Voltage across this capacitor is V, and voltage across this C by 5 is V1 plus V. V2 dash is V1 plus V. So this will come out to be V1 into 1.2, V is equal to 1.2 V1. Then V1 plus 1.2 V1. So j omega will get cancelled out. V1 will get cancelled out. So it is Cx is equal to C by 6, and this will be 2.2. So this is 1.1 C by 3. Okay. So that is 1.1 C by 3. So this will be the capacitance Cx required. In our next problem, it is saying each conductor of a 33 kV three-phase system. Now this is given as the system voltage. So this is actually line voltage, that is 33 kV. So phase voltage will be 33 divided by root 3. So how much does this come out as? 19.05 kV. Ratio of shunt to mutual capacitance is 0.1. So M is given as 0.1. We need to find voltage across each insulator and the string efficiency. Now we know V2 is equal to V1 into 1 plus M, that is 1.1 V1. V3 is equal to 1 V1 M square plus 3M plus 1. So that is 1.31 V1. So V1 plus V2 plus V3 will be 3.41 V1, which is equal to 19.05 kV. So V1 will be 19.05 divided by 3.41. So this comes out to be 5.586 kV. To find out V2, V2 will be equal to V1 into 1.1. So how much does this come out? This will come out to be 6.145 kV. V3 is equal to V1 into 1.31. So how much does this come out? So this will come out to be 7.318 kV. So this is the voltage across each insulator. Now it is asking for string efficiency. Now string efficiency we represented as V1 plus V2 plus V3 by 3 V3 into 100%. Now this will be equal to V1 plus 1.1 V1 plus 1.31 V1 divided by 3 into 1.31 V1 into 100%. So this will come out to be 3.41 divided by 3.93 into 100%. So how much does this come out? 3.41 by 3.93 into 100. It will be 86.77%. Okay, so that is your string efficiency for this system. And as I told you, it is independent of the voltage of the system. Okay, it is only dependent on the parameter M and the number of disks. In our next problem, it is saying a 6.6 kV 50 Hz single core lead sheathed cable has the following data. Conductor diameter is 1.5 cm, length 4 km, internal diameter 3 cm. Okay, and resistivity of the insulation is this much, relative permittivity is this. Now insulation resistance in case of underground cable is rho by 2 pi L ln r by r, where r is the outer radius, small r is the inner radius. If we write it in terms of diameter, it will be d by d. Multiplying both these terms by 2, the formula will remain same. Resistivity is 1.3 into 10 raised to power 12 by 2 pi into length is 4 kilometer, that is 4000 meter, ln outer radius is 3 centimeter, outer diameter, inner diameter is 1.5, because it is saying internal diameter of sheath. So actually this is my conductor, this is your sheath. So internal diameter of sheath is actually outer diameter, and a conductor radius or conductor diameter is the inner diameter. Okay, so sheath internal diameter will be the outer diameter for our formula, 3 by 1.5. So how much does this come out? It will be 1.3 into 10 raised to power 12 divided by 2 divided by pi divided by 4000 into ln 2. So this will be 35.85 mega ohm. Okay, so that is why the insulation resistance is always high. Next, it is asking capacitance. Now capacitance is 2 pi epsilon naught epsilon r ln r by r, or we can say 2 pi epsilon naught epsilon r ln d by d. So 2 pi into 8.85 10 raised to power minus 12 into epsilon r is 3.5, ln outer diameter is 3, inner is 1.5. So how much will this come out? 2 pi into 8.85 10 raised to power minus 12 into 3.5 divided by ln 2. So this will come out to be 0.28 nanofarad per kilometer. And if we calculate the actual value, it will be into 4. So it will be 1.12 nanofarad. Okay, that is 0.28 into 4. Next, it is asking maximum electrical stress. As I told you, the maximum electrical stress occurs at the surface of the conductor. So maximum electrical stress, E max, is actually V by R ln R by R, where V is the conductor voltage or V is the per phase voltage. So per phase voltage will be 6600 by root 3 divided by inner radius is how much? 1.5 by 2, then ln 3 by 1.5. Okay, So how much will this come out? 6.6 divided by root 3 divided by 0.75 divided by ln2. So this comes out to be 7.33 kilovolt per centimeter. Okay, so this will be the maximum electrical stress and it will occur at the surface of the conductor. In our next problem, it is saying consider a 3-core 3-phase 50 Hz 11 kV cable whose conductors are denoted as RYB. The interface capacitance between each pair of conductors is 0.2 microfarad, that is C1 is 0.2 microfarad. Okay, and capacitance between line conductor and sheath is 0.4, so C2 is 0.4 microfarad. So per phase capacitance will be Cs plus 3 Cc, that is 0.4 plus 3 into 0.2, that is 1 microfarad. Now it is asking line charging current, which is equal to omega C phase V phase. So it will be 2 into pi into 50. C phase will be 10 raised power minus 6. V phase will be 11 kV by root 3. So how much will this come out? 100 pi into 10 raised power minus 6 multiplied by 11,000 by root 3. So this will be around 2 ampere. So this will be the per phase line charging current. And in case of transmission line, since we consider a star connection, the line current will be same as your phase current. So you can also call it as directly line charging current. In our next problem, it is saying the inner and outer diameter of a cable are 3 cm and 8.5 cm. Okay, so outer diameter is 8.5 cm, inner diameter is 3 cm. The cable has two materials insulated with two materials like this. Okay, so this will be capital R, this will be small r. Let me call this radius as R1. Okay, having permittivity 5 and 3. We know the material with higher permittivity will be placed near to the conductor. And their corresponding stress, that is the maximum electric field, is 38 and 28. We need to find thickness of each layer. So Emax1 will be 38, Emax2 will be 28. We know the maximum electric field occurs at the inner surface of the insulator. So this will be lambda by 2 pi epsilon naught r. This will be lambda by 2 pi epsilon naught r1. So if we take 38 by 28, and here we have to take epsilon 1, epsilon 2. If we take the ratio, it will be r1 epsilon 2 over r epsilon 1. So r1 will be r epsilon 1 by epsilon 2 into 38 by 28. The inner radius r will be 1.5 centimeter into 5 by 3 into 38 by 28. So this will come out to be 38 by 28 into 5 by 3 into 1.5. So that will be 3.392 centimeter. So now thickness of each layer. Thickness of one will be R1 minus R, that is 3.392 minus 1.5, that is 1.892 centimeter. Thickness of second layer will be T2, that is equal to R minus R1, that is 4.25, that is 8.5 by 2, 3.392. So how much will this come out? It will be 0.857 centimeter. Okay, so this is the thickness of the two insulating layer. Now we need to find the safe working voltage of the cable, that is the maximum voltage of the cable. To find the maximum voltage of the cable, we need to find maximum voltage across each insulator. Now other formula for the electric stress or the maximum electric field is in terms of voltage. Suppose voltage of first disk is V1, so it will be V1 by R ln R1 by R. It implies V1 will be E1R ln R1 by R. E1 is 38 into 1.5 divided by ln 3.392 by 1.5. So this will come out to be 46.5 kilovolt. Okay, since unit is in kilovolt per centimeter, I have substituted here in centimeters. Similarly, suppose voltage of 2 is V2. Now the maximum voltage for the insulator 2 will occur at inner radius, that is R1 ln R by R1. So V2 will be E2 R1 ln R by R1. E2 is 28, R1 is 3.392 ln 4.25 by 3.392. So how much will this come out to be? It will be 21.41 kV. Now safe working voltage will be the total voltage, that is 46.5 plus 21.41. So this will be almost 68 kV. So this will be the safe working voltage of the cable. In our last problem, it is saying the charging current drawn by a cable with 3 cores and protected by a metal sheath when switched on to a 11 kV 50 Hz supply. The capacitance between two cores with the third core connected to sheath is 3.7. As I told you, this is the case number 3. When one core is connected to sheath and capacitance is measured between two cores, it is C phase by 2. It implies C phase will be 2 into 3.7, that is 7.4 microfarad. So line charging current will be omega C phase V phase. Omega will be 2 into pi into 50. C phase will be 7.4 into 10 to the power minus 6. V phase will be 11,000 by root 3. So this will come out to be 14.77 ampere. Okay. So you have to remember the cases where we found the per phase capacitance in terms of measured capacitance under different cases. Okay, so these sort of problems can be framed from underground cable and the insulator. So these are very limited set of problems. The problem from outside these problem is very hard to form. Mostly these sort of numericals can only be framed. So be well aware about these type of problems. Though these topics are rarely asked, but they have a limited set of problems, so it is easy to prepare. In our next lecture, we will see the distribution system. We will see first what is the corona loss and how we can quantify at what voltage the corona will occur. And then we will proceed to the distribution system. Hi guys, as we have seen so far, we have studied the overhead transmission line as well as the underground cables. So now, in case of underground cable, one result that we derived was voltage gradient or the electric field was maximum at the surface of the conductor. So same will be the case for our overhead transmission line, that the voltage gradient or electric field will always be maximum at the surface of conductor. How much will it be? Lambda by 2 pi epsilon naught R. Okay. So this electric field will decrease as the distance from the center of the conductor will increase. We plotted electric field also. Inside the conductor we can assume to be 0, and then it decreases exponentially. So it is maximum at the surface of conductor. Now we know in a dielectric, if electric field is greater than dielectric strength, then what will happen? Dielectric breakdown. If such a case happens, then the dielectric, that is the air around the conductor, breaks down and it starts conducting. And this is called as your corona, when the air around the conductor will break down. Now when the air starts conducting, there are two phenomena. The energy that is being dissipated in the air appears as sound, and that too hissing sound. And it is also converted into light energy, that is bluish green light or reddish brown. Okay, so whatever is the energy that is being dissipated in the air will either be converted to the sound energy or the light energy. So when corona occurs, then we will either hear a hissing sound or we will observe a glow around the conductor. Now when two conductors are placed very close together and dielectric around the conductors will break, then what will happen? There will be a current flow between the two conductors, which will be line to line fault. So that is why distance between the conductors should be sufficiently high to avoid any corona discharge between the two conductors. That is why distance is usually kept higher than 15 times the radius. So that even if the air around each conductor breaks down, that air will not be able to conduct the current between the two conductors. Okay. So that is why distance between the conductors must always be high. Now, suppose I want to arrive at the result, what voltage will cause the corona? We know whenever the electric field will be greater than the dielectric strength, corona will occur. But I cannot measure the electric field intensity, so rather I would like to know what is the voltage at which we can observe the corona. That voltage is called as critical disruptive voltage, the voltage above which the corona will occur. For that, first we must understand the dielectric strength. The dielectric strength of air at NTP is 30 kV per centimeter if we are talking about peak voltage or maximum voltage, or it is 21.1 kV RMS per centimeter. Okay. So this will be the dielectric strength of the air at NTP. NTP means normal temperature and pressure. That is, temperature is 25 degrees centigrade, pressure is 1 atm. Okay, at that the dielectric strength is this much. Now whenever the maximum electric field will go higher than this G naught, then dielectric breakdown will occur and corona can be observed. So we need to derive the electric field in terms of voltage, and then we will equate it to the dielectric strength to determine what is that voltage at which the corona will occur. Okay, so first we must arrive at the maximum electric field. Now suppose we are considering a single phase 2 wire line. Here the radius of one is RA, other is RB. Okay, so if we want to find the electric field, suppose this has a charge lambda, this has minus lambda. So electric field here will be away from the charge, due to this will be towards the charge. So what is the electric field at a distance x? Due to lambda, it will be lambda by 2 pi epsilon naught x, and due to minus lambda, it will be lambda by 2 pi epsilon naught d minus x. Why I have added these two fields? Because they are pointing in the same direction. Due to negative charge, it is towards the charge, and due to positive charge, it is away from the charge. So this will be lambda by 2 pi epsilon naught. Here lambda is the linear charge density, 1 by x plus 1 by d minus x. Now suppose I want to find the voltage difference between the two conductors. So I am assuming that the radius of both is same. So potential difference can be calculated as minus E dot dr. If we want to find VAB, that is equal to VA minus VB, then we will integrate it from d minus r up to r. This is the distance of B, this is the distance of A. Since we are doing VA minus VB, we will go from B to A. So B is at a distance d minus r, A is at a distance r. So V will be minus lambda by 2 pi epsilon naught d minus r to r 1 by x plus 1 by d minus x dx minus lambda by 2 pi epsilon naught 1 by x integration will be log x minus ln d minus x d minus r up to r. So it will be minus lambda 2 pi epsilon naught limits will be d minus r up to r. When we put the limit as r by d minus r minus when we put d minus r by r. If we take minus sign inside, it will be lambda by 2 pi epsilon naught ln d minus r by r. Minus of log is log of 1 by x ln r by d minus r. This will be lambda by 2 pi epsilon naught into 2 ln d minus r by r. So from here I can calculate lambda. Lambda is equal to pi epsilon naught over ln d minus r by r. Now if we substitute this in the electric field expression, electric field will be pi epsilon naught by ln d minus r by r divided by 2 pi epsilon naught into 1 by x plus 1 by d minus x. Here v will also be there. So v by 2 divided by ln d minus r by r. If we take LCM of these two terms, it will be how much? D minus x plus x d minus x. Now we know maximum electric field occurs at the surface of conductor, so x must be r. Electric field will be maximum. So what will be the maximum value of electric field? Emax will be v by 2 ln d minus r by r d by r d minus r. Now suppose I assume that, as I told you, d is much greater than r, so as to avoid any corona discharge between the two conductors. So this term will get cancelled out. It will be v by 2 r ln d by r. Now since the voltage between the two conductors is v, what I can say is voltage between one conductor and ground will be v by 2. So if this conductor is there, this is ground, this voltage is v by 2 and other voltage is also v by 2 up to the second conductor. So this we can call it as phase voltage upon r ln d by r. In case of three phase, v phase will be v by root 3. In case of single phase, it is v by 2. Okay. For corona discharge or critical voltage, Emax must be equal to G naught. So v by r ln d by r should be G naught. It implies v will be r G naught ln d by r. This is the voltage at which corona can be observed. But this is the voltage at the NTP. Suppose there is some condition which is other than NTP. Then G is given as G naught into delta, where delta is actually 3.92 B divided by 273 plus T. B is your relative humidity. T is the temperature. Okay. So voltage will become R G naught delta ln d by r. But as we studied, corona is higher in case of stranded conductor as compared to solid conductor. So I haven't taken any factor which will indicate that the corona loss will be higher in case of stranded conductor. So we must consider a factor which corresponds to the surface of the conductor, whether the surface is smooth or the surface is rough. So we consider another factor which is m naught, called as surface irregularity factor. It will indicate how irregular is your surface. So it must be 1 for smooth surface. It lies between 0.922 to 0.98 for rough surface, 0.8 to 0.88 for stranded conductors. Okay, so voltage will become R G naught M naught delta ln d by R. So this will be your critical disruptive voltage above which the corona can be observed. And remember, this is your phase voltage. Okay, so as the surface will get smoother, or as the surface gets rougher, then M naught will reduce, and as M naught reduces, the critical disruptive voltage will go down. The critical disruptive voltage decreases means that the corona can be observed at a lower voltage as compared to the earlier voltage. Okay, so that is your critical disruptive voltage. Next, let us understand what is corona loss. We just now studied that what is the voltage at which corona will be observed. Now whenever the air will conduct, air around the conductor ionizes, then it becomes conducting, so there will be some losses encountered in the air around the conductor. So that loss is given as 240 by delta. Delta is the condition other than NTP. F plus 25 under root R by D. D is the distance between the two conductors, R is the radius. V minus Vd square 10 raised power minus 5 kilowatt per phase per kilometer. Okay, that will be your corona loss in case of a overhead transmission line. So here what you need to remember is that corona loss is always proportional to F plus 25. As the frequency increases, corona loss will increase. So let us understand the factors on which the corona loss will depend. First, frequency. As frequency increases, corona loss will increase. We just now saw it is proportional to F plus 25. Okay, increasing frequency increases corona loss. What happens if we increase the spacing between the conductor? If you increase the spacing between the conductor, then the corona loss will reduce. So Pc reduces. It is inversely proportional to root D. Then atmospheric condition. Now as you might have observed also, whenever there is a rain, we can hear the hissing sound in the high tension wires. That is due to corona. So corona will be more in the foul weather conditions as compared to the fair weather conditions. And anyways, we can say that delta will reduce, due to which corona will increase. It is inversely proportional to delta. It is 240 by delta, so inversely proportional to delta. Now dust, snow, etc. Now due to dust and snow, what will happen? Surface will become rough, M naught will reduce, due to which Vd will reduce, and corona is proportional to V minus Vd square. So Vd reduces, corona loss will increase. If there is dust and snow deposition on the conductor surface, corona will be higher. What if we increase the conductor radius? Increasing the radius increases disruptive voltage, due to which corona loss will reduce. Okay, and anyways, if we increase the conductor radius, electric field intensity will reduce, so corona loss should also reduce. And last is profile. So we use cylindrical conductors to have uniform electric field so that corona loss is lesser. There should be no sharp ends at the conductor. Now what are the advantages and disadvantages of the corona? First of all, corona is nothing but it is an additional loss in the system. So when the loss can be beneficial is when you have higher than the required amount of energy. If I am having a higher energy, then loss will always be beneficial. So higher energy occurs in case of surges. So in case of surges, corona will be beneficial as it will reduce the steepness of the surge. Okay, steepness of the surge will reduce due to corona. Okay. Next, if the air around the conductor ionizes, so effective diameter of the conductor increases. Now this is the effective radius. So radius will increase, due to which capacitance increases, due to which line charging current increases. So this will be the disadvantage of the corona. It causes increase in the line charging current. Now due to corona, your flux will get distorted. If flux waveform is distorted, then it consists of harmonics. And if there are third harmonics, they will act as zero sequence and cause radio interference. So what happens is, whenever there is corona, and we know corona will be more in foul weather condition, so that is why you might have experienced also with landlines that the signal is weak in case of rains. Okay, or there is a disturbance in the landline because the power conductor will interfere with the telephone conductor in case of rains or the foul weather condition. Let us look at a problem based on corona. Corona loss at 50 Hz is given to me. We have been asked the corona loss at 60 Hz. Corona loss is proportional to F plus 25. So, PC2 by PC1 will be 60 plus 25 divided by 50 plus 25. That is 85 by 75. So, it will be 1 into 85 by 75. That will come out to be how much? 1.13 kilowatt per phase per kilometer. So mostly problems will be framed like this only. You need not practice the problems based on critical disruptive voltage. That was just to explain you how we can determine the voltage at which the corona will occur. Okay. So just remember this concept in the corona, that corona loss is proportional to F plus 25. And remember what is the effect of different parameters on the corona loss. So let us summarize what we learnt in this lecture. We first saw what is the corona. Then we derived the critical disruptive voltage, which was R G naught M naught delta ln D by R. Okay, it was phase to neutral voltage. Then we saw corona loss, which was 240 by delta F plus 25 under root R by D V minus Vd square into 10 raised to power minus 5 kilowatt per phase per kilometer. Then we saw the factors affecting corona and the advantage and disadvantage of the corona. Okay. So in the next lecture we will see how we will use the distribution systems to distribute the power to the load. Till now whatever we have seen, those systems are used to carry the power from the generation to the substation, and they do not distribute the power to the load. In the next lecture we will discuss how to distribute the power to different loads.